Dram watering tools have been the professional's choice for quality and durability for over 80 years. Use a Dram rain wand to create the softest shower of rain for your beds and containers, a 9-pattern revolver spray gun for a variety of uses, or a color storm sprinkler for a lush green lawn and garden. Dram, the professional's choice for lawn and garden. Available at a fine garden center near you. Visit us online at dramm.com. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants, but just not always the same ones. I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the executive editor at Fine Gardening magazine, and today I'm so super excited to have a guest from over across the pond, Annie Guilfoyle, award-winning garden designer and RHS Chelsea Flower Show silver medalist winner. And this is super appropriate to have Annie with us because today's episode we're going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at Chelsea Flower and Garden Show. Annie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Danielle. It's great to be with you. Well, I wish I was over there with you because we are 3,000 miles apart. It's lovely to be with you, and it was lovely to be asked to do this. So yeah, really, really happy.
I mean, you must just be exhausted. I asked you before, just before we hit record, how tired are you? We are literally taping this on the heels of 2 days ago, the show ending 2 days ago. You were judging and at the show for numerous days, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Well, in fact, we judge on the Sunday and Saturday and Sunday prior to press day, which is the Monday, which all happened a week ago. So then the show runs for a week open to the public. So yeah, the week, not this weekend, but last weekend, it was exhausting. Yeah. and judging at the show. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so just to start off, how many years have you been involved with the Chelsea Flower and Garden Show?
Well, that is a really difficult question, Danielle. For as long as I can remember, but in terms of attending, I actually had a garden there myself when I was a student back in 1994. That was terrifying, and one of the most terrifying experiences. It's much easier to be a judge, I'll tell you. And then, so for about the last 5 years, I've been involved with the judging committee at the show for the RHS, and so every year. The judges kind of rotate because there are lots of judges, lots of committees that do different bits of the show. It's not just one big gang doing the whole show because that would take months. So each year we rotate to do a different part of the show, which is really, really good fun. Yeah.
So are you usually paired with the same co-judges in the same group?
No, not necessarily. Sometimes it is. I mean, you see the same familiar faces, but sometimes members of the judging panel might actually be exhibiting that year, and so they obviously can't be a judge. So they, like Tom Stewart Smith and Anne-Marie Powell, for example. So they were on Main Avenue. They can't be judges. So you do see the same faces. Occasionally you're in the same group, but not necessarily. So that's really nice too, because you get to meet different people from different disciplines, which is great.
Oh, I bet. So I have to know, how nerve-wracking is it to be a judge, and are you able to tell us, well, I guess so, because it's concluded, are you able to tell us how the gardens overall, in your judging opinion, were this year?
Okay, well, I have to be very diplomatic because I am a judge, and even though the show's over, we are kind of told or asked very nicely not to do too much social media posting that can be construed as whatever, even though the judging has happened. Because there was a little bit of controversy on the TV about judging this year. So, it is a hot topic. Anyway, going back to the first part of your question, it's not as nerve-wracking as being an exhibitor, for sure. It is, I always say about judging, it's odd. It's not an enjoyable experience in a way, but it's a very interesting experience. But really, it is enjoyable. I mean, it is really interesting to get together with a group of people to analyse and critique different aspects of the show. But it is, ultimately, you are judging your peers, and so it is an odd situation. But I wouldn't call it nerve-wracking. There's a tension. You have to be very diplomatic. It's really hard because judging happens over the Saturday and the Sunday, and then there's press day, and then Tuesday is the day that the medals get announced. And you, as a judge, so therefore you might have 2 days when you're walking around the show talking to people who gardens you've judged or even gardens you haven't judged, and you can't give anything away, and it's really hard. I mean, even your face, so you try and avoid having a conversation with some people, but then that could be misconstrued as well. What are they hiding from? So it that's the nerve-wracking bit, is thinking, oh my goodness. So it's actually best not to say anything, and I was very careful about social media just being very, very general, because it's quite, it could put the RHS into a difficult position if you say, oh, this was my favourite garden. Oh, do you mean that this, so
right. Wait, does that mean that this should have been the gold medalist and not the silver medalist?
Well, exactly. That was the thing. So it is. I think that's it's treading a little bit on eggshells for a while, because you are. But having said that, and yes, there was a bit of controversy on the BBC coverage about judging, because different presenters have different opinions, and so you have to be careful. You do have to be careful that you're not giving anything away, but also people have put so much time and effort and energy into exhibiting that really it's so important to give them respect, that they have really put, even if they've not won the medal that they wanted or hoped for, everybody has to be respectful and kind to each other. And in this day and age when information goes so quickly and opinions fly around on social media, sometimes it's just best to say very little and just smile.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we need to make a T-shirt of that, Annie. Just say
I
very
think
little,
so. Well, and I'll wear
smile.
it next year when I'm judging.
I love that. Well, so for our American audience, primarily who are listening to this podcast, this will be out with about a week and a half after Chelsea has concluded. But I will say that not a sponsor, but hey, Netflix, we're available if you want to sponsor us. On Netflix, there is the BBC version. There is a 6 episodes on Chelsea Flower and Garden Show 2024 with Monty John as a co-host. And so if our American audience wants to see some video of what we're talking about, they can go there to watch. But we are also very, very excited that Annie has given us so many behind the scenes photos, which is amazing, of judging this year and being at the show this year. So go to finegardening.com, click on that podcast tab. You'll be able to see all of these photos as we talk about certain aspects and behind the scenes. But I was just curious, what is the most surprising thing for someone who's never attended Chelsea before when they get there?
Well, I think, funnily enough, it's something you're not conscious of until you see a picture of the showground without the show in it. It is tiny. I don't know if you guys are familiar with a TV program called Doctor Who, an English TV program, and he had a TARDIS, which is a very small building, it's like a telephone box he'd step into, which is like another world. Well, the RHS is a TARDIS, and so you do, when you look at the image, and I've sent you guys through an image that I hope you can use. If you see an image of the showground without the show in it, it looks tiny, and it is tiny. And so when you're inside the show, there is an awful lot crammed in. Now, I have the luxury of being there on a non-public day, so I don't feel too constrained. But when you're there on a public day, I think you will feel this, because you are literally in a crowd. You know, you're in a very big crowd, and sometimes you're like 10 or 12 people deep to see a garden and photograph a garden. So that's hard, I think, for people who are visiting the show. I think that's the one thing that people find most difficult. And of course, if the weather's not good, you know, when it's raining, everybody runs into the marquee under cover, and so then that gets crowded. And if the weather's nice, everyone's out in the gardens. And I think people think to get there early at 8 o'clock when the tickets when the doors open, but a lot of people try and do that. So in a way, the best time to go is early evening, because people have sort of exhausted, and it tends to kind of settle down a little bit, and you probably get a better chance. But going back to your original question, I think the most surprising thing is what a tiny footprint this huge show actually takes. It's quite, I can't quite believe it myself until I look at the photograph, and you look at, because it's just a park when it's not the show.
Yeah.
And it's part of what's called the Royal Hospital, which is where the Chelsea pensioners live. And I think in total it's about 66 acres, which sounds large, but that also encompasses the Royal Hospital buildings and everything. So I don't actually know out of that 66 how many acres are dedicated to the show, but it's not a lot. It's tiny.
Well, and so this brings up an aspect too, and I feel like most of those who are listening to this podcast are very dyed-in-the-wool gardeners and would know this. But as I was prepping the questions to talk to you about today, a friend of mine who shall remain nameless, I happened to mention the aspect that this is outside. And for Americans, most of our flower and garden shows take place inside. So that is an aspect where you said when it starts to rain, everyone runs for, the overhangs and such. Yeah. So is Chelsea rain or shine?
Oh yes. It's never it's never cancelled due to bad weather. I think a couple of years ago, they had to close one afternoon because it was so windy and wet. I think they did have to close the showground and say to everybody, I'm sorry, you have to leave. But the show is never cancelled completely. And so, yeah, it is rain or shine. And of course, you've got to remember that rain or shine, and my goodness me, it's been really rainy for most of this spring, happening through the build-up. So the poor people building the gardens and preparing the plants have to deal with that weather too. And I think, the nurseries have a really difficult time bringing on plants, holding back plants, for the show gardens or the marquee for the nursery exhibits. But then building the gardens this year, sometimes, well, mostly they had rain, and there were pictures of people just looking like, like mud soaked, wet, and then, or a couple of days of like temperatures up into, which not very much for America, but up into the high 20s, nudging 30, which for you guys is not huge, but for UK suddenly, for that to turn around. And so then of course all the plants want to open. So it can be tricky. It really can. Yeah.
How long is the build out? When do the grounds open to the garden builders versus when the press day occurs?
Yeah. There's in England we have a bank holiday at the beginning of May, and we just had one at the end of May. So the bank holiday weekend at the very beginning of May, like that first weekend, is generally when the first digger goes into the ground, and that's when they start. So it's about 3 weeks to a month's build up. Okay. I think even this year they might have even started a few days before the bank holiday. So let's say the last few days of April. Okay. So it is about a month, 3 weeks to a month of build up. Yeah. Wow.
Again, so mind blowing for an American gardener, because I think, for us, it's these indoor shows. The tractor trailer pulls up. It's a few days of, load all the plants inside and make a faux garden. But these gardens are literally planted in ground. They're in situ. They are a real actualized garden.
They are. I mean, some of the plants might be sunk within a pot, but generally they're not, because to get them close together and make them planted, look really real, often they're taken out of their pots. But all of the construction and the walling and everything, oh my goodness, that's real. And so it's quite something. It really is quite something.
That's just incredible, just to wrap your head around.
I know. And yet, I found when I visited the PHS Philadelphia Flower Show, was judging there a few years ago, I found it really odd that A, it was in March. Wow, that's a weird time to have a flower show. And B, it's all indoors. And of course, I found that the light was, you just can't quite get the light. And so I found, that reverse really strange too.
100%. This almost feels more like a garden show as opposed to a flower show, which is really interesting. Well, with all good garden shows, and you've kind of touched on this a little bit, I'm going to jump all over the place because I have 80 million questions. I'm so excited. But here in America, you lecture over here frequently are taking tour groups and such. We have such a huge emphasis on native plants, and there's been a huge movement, and a lot of folks are now dedicated and committed to this 70% native, 30% benign non-native plants. How important at the Chelsea Flower Show is the idea of UK native plants? And have you seen a growing, stronger presence of that idealism around native plants in recent years?
Yeah, in the UK, it is not as important. Don't get me wrong, there are people, I'm talking outside the show, for example, there are people who are, very much blowing the trumpet for natives, but it isn't as important as it is, as I know, in the US. And at Chelsea, there's nothing to say. I mean, unless you are designing a garden and your brief says this is all British natives, that's a different thing, and then you have to follow your own brief. But no, it's really not as strict as it is, say, in the US. That's interesting. And in fact, I noticed for the first time ever that I've seen, but it may not be the first time, in the marquee, because we mustn't forget that the marquee is which is where all the nurseries are, is a really important part of the show. Mm-hmm. There was a company called Kent Wildflower, and they were exhibiting and selling wildflower seeds. Wow. So that's the first time I've seen that. But like I say, it may not be the first time it's actually happened. Yeah.
Okay. So that's really interesting. I think I saw one of the photos, Annie. They almost had like an apothecary chest, it looked like, that were selling wildflower seeds. I thought the setup was so unbelievable.
It was a beautiful stand, absolutely beautiful.
And this is an aspect of the show, the marquee, as you say, which would be, like a plant marketplace or a plant and garden marketplace. And this is, anyone attending the show can shop through this pop-up area?
Well, yes and no. The nurseries at the show can't sell at the show.
Oh.
The only time they can sell plants is at what they call the big sell-off, which is at Saturday at 5 o'clock. So no, you can't buy. I think sometimes they can sell packets of seeds, but I know you can't sell plants. So the only day is the last day at 5 o'clock. A bell rings, and then people sell off the plants from the gardens and from the nursery. So then it's mayhem. I know, and people are going on a bus with a 30-foot something or other. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It really is. It's quite funny.
That must be so chaotic. Oh my gosh. That is crazy. I never knew that happened.
Yeah, and so the nurseries, in a way, it's quite hard for them. So really all they can do at the show is showcase their plants. So they have a display, they get judged like the gardens do, they get a medal, and they can give away or sell catalogues. But they can't sell from the show. So it's interesting that what they're doing is just it's like their little showcase, really.
Yeah, it's like a trade show, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. That's so crazy. All right, so I can't get away from the display gardens too quickly though. So I have to ask, and you might not be able to tell me, did you have a favorite display garden this year? And or was there, can you tell us about particular elements of some of the display gardens that really just captivated you and your judging team?
Well, I don't think I'm contravening RHS judging rules to say, personally, for me, there wasn't a kind of breathtaking moment like there was last year. So last year we had Sarah Price's garden that ultimately stopped everyone in their tracks and took everyone's breath away. It was just like a beautiful painting. It was extraordinary. So for me personally, there wasn't really a garden that did that to me. There wasn't one that I just went, oh my God, that's amazing. However, there were lots of gardens on Main Avenue that were absolutely beautiful, of course, and exquisitely made with incredible planting. And so to sort of, for me, the highlights probably were Tom Stewart Smith's garden was beautiful, very calm, just green and white, with a beautiful, they kept calling it a shed, but my goodness me, it was better than a shed, designed by his son, who's an architect. This beautiful building, and just green and white and very calm and very considered, and typically Tom, just beautifully established, and it was sort of shade loving planting underneath all these multi-stem hazel trees, absolutely beautiful. That for me, I think everybody, you know, I think personally at Chelsea, one thing that I kind of crave is green, because there's so much colour everywhere. Okay. That when you've got something that's very green and has got a lot of foliage and a lot of texture, then that really, it's like in the marquee, I gravitate towards the nurseries that are just selling hostas or ferns. I don't know why, because they just stand out because of the wonderfulness of all the textures and colours of green. Because the show is so colourful, it's so bright and vibrant. But back to Main Avenue, and then the winning garden, Ulla Maria's garden, which was about forest bathing. So it was it had 50 birch trees in it, and again exquisite shade planting. So it was like a little miniature woodland, absolutely beautiful. And she I think very deservedly won Best in Show. And it's lovely to see a woman winning Best in Show. I can't remember the last time a woman won Best in Show.
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember. I mean, I'm trying to think whether Sarah Price's previous garden won Best in Show. I'm not sure it did. So that's quite a thing. To up the numbers of women designers on Main Avenue, but also to have a woman winning Best in Show. So I think she was utterly deserving of it. And then, and now I am being completely biased, one of my ex-students, Matthew Child's garden, which was again absolutely wonderful. It did win Best Construction in Show because it was so exquisitely put together and built, with lots of wonderful details. So for me on Main Avenue, I think those were my standouts really. You know, they were, I was going to say they were very different, but actually I think that in a way they were quite similar, that they were all very calm, very relaxing, not too vibrantly colourful, but just a beautiful spaces and exquisitely put together.
Tell us a little bit more about Matthew's garden, because I think that we skipped over
Yes.
some of the details in that garden, which were pretty on point.
Yes, exactly. Well, I suppose to sort of to put it all into context, an interesting thing has happened at the RHS show over the last 3 or 4 years, where a couple of individuals who are anonymous have donated money and created a company called Project Giving Back, and it's a charity that they've created whereby they match up charities and designers to work together. And I think I'm not alone in saying that it's pretty much saved the RHS show. It's just amazing, because it's allowed. I mean, they've spent millions of pounds on this. You know, they have allowed young and up and coming designers and more senior designers to put together a design, and then for that to be in aid of a charity. So therefore, a lot of the gardens have a charitable message because they are sponsored by, well, they are there for a charity. And Matthew's garden was for a charity called the Terence Higgins Trust, which is a well-known charity now, which was set up for people living with HIV. And so Matthew's garden was sort of, because again, it's a difficult thing for the designers to do. They have to, in a way, they have to visualize, or they have to create a message through a garden medium to talk about the charity. So Matthew's was this landscape that was sort of difficult and quite rugged and brutal, and it was taken from a Welsh landscape, so all made of slate, beautiful slate. And it also went up. You know, there was about three different levels, and so it was about a journey not only the journey, I guess, of the charity and people living with HIV, but also, it was sort of putting into a garden context this sort of, change that's happened through the years, and so there's like all this sort of deeper meaning going on. But if you knew nothing about the story or the sponsors or anything, the garden was absolutely beautiful because it was looking at a sort of slate quarry like landscape with water, lots of different beautiful little rivulets of water coming out of stone and rocks and boulders, beautiful planting, going from, I wouldn't say ornamental because it wasn't in any point very ornamental, but perhaps a little bit more colour, up to sort of a slightly more rugged and quiet and calm area. So but it had an awful lot going on, and the contractors who built it, honestly, it was just a work of art. I mean, to think that they did that in a couple of weeks, really, it's incredible, absolutely incredible.
To create what sounds like almost like this craggy crevice garden
Absolutely.
with elevation. I mean, just the idea of how much stonework and masonry and architectural engineering probably had to go into that.
Absolutely.
I'm blown away.
Huge rocks and boulders and crevice gardening. And I know there's been rockeries at Chelsea, but I don't think anybody's identified crevice gardening as a thing, which I know is well known in the States. And so Matthew, is probably one of the first, maybe not the first, but one of the few people to incorporate crevice gardening. So very exciting. Yeah.
That's so cool. All right. So I always hate this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because everybody has to ask this question. Did you find any overarching themes come out of the show?
Well, yes, in a way, but in a way it was a sort of prescribed theme, because in the last few years the RHS have asked, well, not just asked, but insisted that the designers embrace sustainability. So every garden has to have a life after the show. It has to go somewhere and be a garden somewhere. But also, as much as possible, every material that's used has to be sustainable. So there was a lot of sustainability going on in every garden, even on the trade stands and the nursery stands, repurposed materials, pre-loved things, secondhand things, borrowed, all of that. So that I think the message of sustainability, I think, is strong, and I think you could call it a theme, really, because it's showing people that it's not great to be, digging for new stone or, shipping plants all across the world, or materials, that what's local, what's even in your garden that you can reuse and repurpose. So that I think was a really strong message, and is such an important message as well.
No, absolutely. Okay, so that leads me to, I saw a lot to do with, there was quite a bit of, in the photos that you sent and the previews that I got of the show, a lot to do with pollinator promoting pollinators. There was a lot of pollinator gardens that, or aspects of gardens that were called out as pollinator friendly. There was a photo, and you're going to have to put this in context for me because I was like, that's so cool. It almost looked like a fire hose stanchion that came up and out of a garden.
It was a fire hose. Yep.
Well, and it had been outfitted as like a
hotel.
Yes, like a bug hotel or a mason bee area.
Yes, exactly. And well, that's well observed. Yes, it was, because it was from a fire hose. So in the marquee, there are in one of the corners, there's an area called Plants First. So as well as there being nursery stands or nursery stalls, there are little mini gardens, and there's about half a dozen of them. And these are little designs, little gardens that are designed by designers and built by contractors. But the thing is, they have to focus on plants, and they have to focus on plants from specialist nurseries. And actually, I have to say that, in my opinion, it's probably the most exciting bit of the show, because you've got young new-ish, well, young new designers, you've got people new to the game, and you've got people who are driven by plants. That's their thing. And you know, you're going to see plants there that are unusual and beautiful. And that particular garden that you were talking about is from Nottingham, and that garden is going to a fire station. It's going to be realised in a fire station, and it was the charity that, and in fact, the name of the charity is Pulp Friction. Pulp Friction is a charity. I had to think about that before I said it. Pulp Friction. So the charity is well, it's all about people with learning difficulties and learning disabilities getting involved with horticulture and gardening and everything to do with plants. So the furniture and the planting and everything. And the reason it had the sort of the fire hose thing was it's going back to a fire station in Nottingham, which is wonderful.
That's so great. Now, to put you on the spot, do you remember the designer of that garden?
Do you know, I'm going to have to quickly look at it. No, that's fine, because it was two designers actually.
Oh, okay.
I've got it right in front of me. So it was Will Dutch, and then a guy called Tintin Azure Markson. Well, that's a name you should never forget.
That
really.
That is.
Yeah.
Well,
so
well done to them, because it was really spectacular. And we'll put some, definitely, we've got some great photos that you had taken, some of the details of that pollinator garden, the fire hose details, the reimagining and repurposing of a lot of fire elements, fire station elements. And so now that makes total sense. We'll get those on our show notes for sure.
Great.
So, okay, we were talking about plant forward, these almost pocket gardens or smaller gardens that are off the marquee, that are very plant focused. There is this huge aspect of the show that is all about new plants, and there are medals that are given out to new plants, and I feel like you guys pick out a new plant, award it over there at Chelsea, and then here in America 5 years later, we get it. So wet our whistles. Was there anything in particular that just jumped out at you as a very interesting, even if it wasn't an award winner, new plant this year?
Well, for me, a plant that I discovered, and unfortunately I didn't take a photograph of it, so it wasn't in the photos that I sent you, was a plant called a Cotula hispida. And it was on Matthew's garden, and it's an alpine, and so it's a little grey, soft grey, almost looks like an artemisia leaf, little soft grey, and then tiny little yellow flowers, like little pinhole or pin button above it. It was just beautiful, and I could kick myself that I didn't take a picture of it.
That's okay. Maybe we'll see it in some of the backgrounds of Matthew's garden. So
Cotula hispida. I had to write it down to make sure, and I don't think it's a particularly new, but it's an alpine, and of course, you know, alpines in this country often, people overlook them and they don't give them the credence that they deserve. But they're such beautiful plants. Yeah. So well done to him to put that in. And I noticed that he put it towards the front to catch people's attention. So it certainly caught my attention.
Absolutely. It sounds really adorable. And yes, we love our little alpines here and our little rock gardens.
Yeah.
So I was surprised that you weren't going to say some sort of chrysanthemum, because there was a photo that you sent of these giant, huge chrysanthemums that literally were the size of planets. You know, there's Jupiter, there's Neptune, huge. Yeah. You have to explain what was going on in that photo.
Well, those photos, I took a few photographs in the marquee because of course the people in the marquee, the nursery stands, they can't be setting up a month in advance. They're setting up 24 hours in advance. So they pretty much work through the night on the Saturday night, ready for the Sunday. And so when you go into the marquee Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, it's a hive of activity. It's an extraordinary hive of activity because, you know, people have brought plants out of refrigeration and you know, they're putting them all in. And I just loved that I know the one you mean, the chrysanthemums looking like great big planets. And the woman kind of standing looking at them, exhausted probably,
Yes,
you know,
and
just
her
thinking,
her head is so minuscule in
yes,
comparison to these
exactly, exactly.
giant
Yeah,
plants.
absolutely, absolutely. So I think, you know, it's just for me, it's that, well, it's that sense of achievement and the fact that they are some of the plant nursery stands are very naturalistic and like a little mini garden, and some of them are very like a sort of work of art or artificial looking, like that was where it's almost like an abstract painting.
Yeah.
And whether you like the plants that are being shown or not, that you have to appreciate all that work and effort that goes into it. It's just extraordinary.
Unbelievable. So one has to ask, because you're behind the scenes, are the days leading up to showtime, is it absolute chaos behind the scenes?
Well, it's managed chaos.
Okay.
And it's changed over the years, but it's quite strict in as much as, you know, lorries have time slots. There's a one-way system. Years ago, I mean, going back, say 35 years ago when I had a garden there, you know, the public could walk through the gardens while the show was being built, and you could, up until about 4 days before the show, you could just stroll through because it was a park. Well, of course, you know, I suppose kind of post 9/11 and everything was security tightening up, you know, now, oh my goodness me, you there's no way you can get in if you're not, you know, fully badged up and everything. So, but, you know, and then again, going back 35 years, after the show was over, you could go and crawl in all the skips and take out things and you know, and that was just the norm. Well, no, that doesn't happen anymore. But the build up to the show is, yes, it is an organised chaos, if you like. The more experienced designers and people get their plants in at least by the beginning of the week before press day,
Okay.
so that the plants can kind of relax into the space. So I think now people are a little less last minute. But you know, it really, and there's somebody there are two people actually who sit. They have like a little cabin, and they are overseeing that sort of one-way system of everybody, you know, parking. And then the thing is, you've got all this chaos of people building gardens, and then you've got TV crews filming the people. So you've got huge TV crews coming through with booms and cameras and people, and you know, how somebody doesn't get something dropping on their head, I have no idea. It's extraordinary. But generally, those people who've done it for a few years now know to get the big things in and not to be last minute, and so that you're not kind of working right up to the wire. But like I say, in the marquee, it is really, I mean, people are not supposed to stay there overnight the night before, but a lot of people are just trying to get their stands finished, and they want their plants to be as fresh as possible. So it is quite chaotic. It looks chaotic, but I think, you know, I didn't see anybody in dire straits. You know, years and years ago, I remember, you know, people used to help the last person that hadn't finished to complete their garden. But
That's good sportsmanship right there.
Absolutely.
I like it.
I didn't see anybody kind of in you know, in that sort of situation. Everybody looked quite calm but tired, I have to say.
Yeah. I can only imagine. Well, so
Yeah.
what's the dynamic between if you're signing up and basically quote unquote planting a garden weeks in advance? Who maintains and waters and prunes and deadheads, and is that the responsibility of the design team? And
Yes, it is. Well, most gardens will have contractors who are building the garden and putting in the big stuff, and then they'll have a planting team who are usually a separate team, who are usually headed up by somebody, not necessarily the designer, but somebody. So, for example, to give you an example, like Matthew Childs had Helen Basson, who is a plantswoman, but I mean, at the moment she's an archaeologist doing a PhD at Sheffield, and she was drafted in to head up the team, to oversee the planting team, and they will have had pre-meetings. They might have even had a little kind of mock-up of areas of the garden back at the nurseries, just to put the plants together. And so that team are responsible for putting all the plants into position, cutting off any dead leaves, you know, even cleaning and polishing and washing plants, removing anything that is not looking good. So it's a separate team. Of course, you don't want too many people, you know, probably 4 or 5 at the most, I would say, depending on the size of the garden, obviously.
Oh, right, because you don't want things trounced and
Yeah,
looking
and too
like an
many
army.
people, exactly. You want a really good team, a well knitted team who can get on with it. Yeah, I'd say usually the planting teams are about 4, maybe 5, and occasionally there are volunteers who come in and help, but they might be sort of outside the garden just cleaning off plants, handing them to the next person who then puts them into position. So yeah.
What would you say, and forgive me for being so ignorant, but is every garden roughly the same square footage?
No, no. So Main Avenue, the gardens are oblong, and they tend to be about 20 meter. No, but yeah, about 20. No, 12 meters, 12 meters plus in length,
Okay.
and then about, say, 6 or 7 meters wide, I think is about it. But sometimes I know one of the gardens was slightly oversized. So Main Avenue gardens are long and thin.
Okay.
The sanctuary gardens, which go along the top of the showground, are square, and I think they're usually 10 by 10 meters.
Okay.
Then there are the balcony and container gardens, which are in the sort of little wooded bit in the side, by the side under the trees, and they are very, very small because they are representing a balcony or a little patio, and they're probably about 3.5 meters by 2.5 meters wide.
Okay.
And the little gardens in the nursery, that the plants first gardens, they're probably about 5 meters by 6 meters, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for, just average, so for a main avenue garden, because it seems like those are probably the largest of
Yes, they
the
are.
different sections, what would a planting crew look like? How many people are we talking about here?
Oh, I think still a tight team. You'll have one person heading up the planting team, and then probably 5 maybe maximum, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
I think the more, what often happens is you'll get the same team working together year after year, which is always good because the call goes out, are you free to work on this garden? And so that team will have worked together before. Everybody knows each other's strengths and weaknesses, and so that's really good. So you're not getting 5 or 6 people who don't know each other and not knowing what to do. So I'd say a small team and a tight team, but 5 or 6, yeah.
And now I gotta ask, is everybody required to go barefoot? Because I saw a lot of shoes that were ditched on the side of gardens in some of these photos.
I couldn't resist these photos. Well, because on that Sunday before press day, people are literally hoovering the garden. I've seen people with a hoover, honestly. Last year I have a picture of guys with a hoover, washing leaves. And here's the thing, actually, the stipulation is that you wear steel toe cap boots, you wear, safety boots throughout all the build up, and even the judges are told to wear safety boots for anything up to when press day happens. But of course there's a point at which the garden is finished, there's no construction happening, and therefore people are either taking their shoes off and they're in their socks or their bare feet, or they've put on those those plastic foot thing, those little,
oh my gosh, crime scene investigation booties.
Yeah, it does look a bit like CSI. Yeah, it does. It's exactly that. So this, I had a bit of a thing going on with all these shoes at the edges of gardens. It's so funny to see people, in their sock feet or their bare feet. It's just lovely.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh
But
my
they just don't want to put dirty footprints or boot marks into freshly made gravel or anything like that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. I just loved it. I thought, wow, that's a really nice pair of Asics right there. I like those sneakers.
I know, you could actually go around with a big bag and just fill them full of fruit. I hadn't thought about that. Next year I might, actually. Looking what size there are, that'll do.
There you go. I'm a 6, that works.
Yeah.
So let's have a red carpet debrief, right? So we're not on the BBC. This is better than the BBC. This is Let's Argue About Plants. So a red carpet debrief. A favorite moment of yours, and how about a funny moment of yours that occurred during the show?
Well, my favourite moment actually was spotting what I called the tree of the show, which was I was standing with my back to Matthew's garden. I looked across and it was a Cheonanthus, which you do not see in the UK very much at all. I've seen it a lot in the States. And it was on Harry Holding's garden. And I looked at it and I thought, that's a Cheonanthus. And I thought, oh my God, I've never seen one at Chelsea before.
Really? So white fringe tree for everybody looking for a common name.
I sent you a picture. It looked magnificent. And honestly, there's probably 1 or 2 nurseries in the UK where you could get it, but nobody knows of that tree over here. So I went over to Harry and I said, Harry, I've got to congratulate you for 2 things. He said, oh, what? I said, well, A, it's a beautiful garden, but B, that's the tree of the show. And then lo and behold, it did win something called Tree of the Show.
Oh, gosh.
Which I didn't even know existed, but it was a little wooden plaque given by Tony Kirkham, who used to be the head of trees at Kew, for the best. I think probably the most unusual, but the best, most interesting tree of the show. There were lots of lovely trees at the show. Don't get me wrong.
That was a lovely specimen, though. It was gorgeously framed.
Yeah,
the canopy was gorgeously framed. It was in perfect bloom too, which
absolutely.
I don't know how the timing worked on that, because anybody who's had a Cheonanthus knows, 1 second gorgeous white dangly beard-like blossoms,
yes, exactly,
and the next they've all fallen off.
Well, I think when I said to Harry, how come you were so insightful to get this tree? He said, well, I was at the nursery and I saw it. And it was just about to break into flower, and I thought, do you know what? It's probably going to be in flower for the show. So, gosh, it was just luck, really, and obviously good judgment too.
Absolutely.
But it just it was one of those examples of things working out absolutely perfectly, really perfectly. So I think that for me was a special moment because I recognised the tree. It was like, I didn't go up and go, what on earth is that? I thought, I've seen that. In fact, the first time I ever saw it was at the PHS show a few years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
And I saw it and I thought, gosh, that's so beautiful. So that was it. The funniest moment, oh gosh, well, I think it has to be in the marquee, just watching people, preparing their stands, just this, to the element of them, I couldn't even pinpoint one person. It was just, it's that wonderful, everybody's lost in this world of just a deadline, really.
Yeah.
And you can't help but smile, it really is wonderful, just absolutely wonderful.
It must be like, to harken back to our pollinator conversation, it must be watching a colony of bees work. Everybody knows what they're doing, but it's just a hive of excitement.
Oh, it certainly is. It really is. No, it's wonderful when everything comes together, and it's fantastic.
That's
absolutely
so
fantastic.
Cool. All right, so I feel like this is we're doing our due diligence about highlights of the show, but we're also educating those who have not been to the Chelsea Flower Show before. So I have to ask, what is the role of the pensioners at Chelsea Flower Show? And for those unfamiliar, what is a pensioner?
Yes. Okay. So if you do get to show that aerial shot that I sent of the show, you've got the showground, which is empty because it's showing how small the ground is. And behind it, you've got what's called the Royal Hospital. So 300 years ago, that was created by Charles II, I believe, as a home hospital, really, for war veterans, really, or veterans of war, Chelsea pensioners. So it's 300 years old, and in fact, coincidentally, there are 300 residents in the Royal Hospital now, and the showground is called the Royal Hospital Ground. So it is more of a rest home. I wouldn't call it a hospital, but it is more of a rest home for pensioners who have given military service, and of course, World War One. I don't think there's anybody left now, but World War Two, there's probably a few left. But of course, there's you can be a veteran of any particular conflict. And they wear these wonderful red jackets, and in fact I've got, because I didn't send you a picture, I'm just holding up. So for people who don't know what on earth I'm talking about, you see these men walking around in these beautiful, and I don't know what the history of those wonderful the red coat with the medals on them.
Yes.
And so they get to walk around the show, and of course they make great photo shoot, and everybody wants them on their garden. And in fact, I noticed on the television coverage on the Saturday afternoon, when they ring the bell at 5 o'clock, they had not all, but some of the Chelsea pensioners lined up on this balcony doing the countdown to the sale. So they are seriously veterans of war and conflict, and of varying ages. I mean, years ago, they all looked, a lot of them were in wheelchairs, and they looked to be in their 80s and 90s and beyond. Now they're of their 60s, 70s, 80s, I guess. But yeah, no, they're a definite, very, very important aspect of the show, really.
It is an iconic image of that stately red uniform, and very, very stately looking.
And they kind of, I think it's their moment, not their moment of glory, because they've had, they've got the glory moment is much more important than that. But they love the posing on the gardens, and they definitely are the selfies with everybody. It must be such a highlight of their year, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do they? I mean, are they? This is silly, but are there certain areas, like, do they stand as ticket takers, or is there any?
Oh, I'm sure they've got a free. I'm sure it's free for them because basically it's in their garden.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah, so no, I'm sure they don't have to pay to get in, and you tend to see them there mostly on press day and Saturday, Sunday, and Saturday and Sunday and Monday. I'm not sure how much they're there during the week, but they might be. They might be. It's so busy during the week that I think they probably enjoy press day, where they can just kind of lounge about.
Right. Well, that kind of leads into my next question, because Sophie's choice question.
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah. Ready? You can only be a judge at Chelsea for the rest of your days. A display garden creator and designer at the show, or 3, just have no responsibilities and attend the show as a layperson.
Well,
Annie Guilfoyle, what would you choose?
Yeah. Well, it's easy in a way, because I certainly wouldn't want to be an attendee on a regular day, because it's like being in this sort of traffic jam. And then I look at everybody who's created a garden, and I see how exhausted they are, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I've got that energy anymore. But certainly judging, I think judging's the best of all worlds. Yes, you have to take a bit of flack sometimes, and there is little moments of controversy, but it is a very robust system that works. But also, the lovely thing is you get to be behind the scenes. You get to go on the gardens, because remember, the public can't go on the gardens, so you do get to go on the gardens, and I think you get. It's a privilege. It's such a privilege to be asked. So I think it's an easy choice. That for me, at this point in time, I think being a judge, definitely. It's I think so. I think it's easy. It's an easy choice. Yeah.
Now I've never been to Chelsea. I've never experienced any of the 3 of those, but I think I would also pick a judge. Like, I like unfettered access to the gardens.
Absolutely. Well, the thing is, you get to go there on the Saturday afternoon when things are not quite finished, Sunday when things should be finished, but there's still people hoovering and mopping and on there with their tiptoes, and then of course press day when everything is polished and ready and finished, and everyone's breathing a sigh of relief. So you get to see the show at those wonderful points, really.
That's so great. Well, yes, and I thought, of all of those, I think my least favorite thing would probably be to be one of the display garden creators, because I saw it was Anne-Marie Powell, right, who won the People's Choice Award this year. And some of the coverage and some of the photos I saw of her, she looked joyful but exhausted.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It is. You can't underestimate. I think it's all consuming, and You know, I think if you've got a really good team with you, like good contractors team, good planting team, that makes all the difference. But, you know, I think even if everything runs really smoothly, I'm sure they're all lying down this week, just horizontal, you know. I mean, oh gosh, you know, they must be exhausted, because also it's all of this build-up, emotional build-up. And then, of course, the designers have to stay, or should be, with the gardens throughout the show week. So for them, the responsibility doesn't just stop on press day and they can just walk away. And, you know, they really ought to be there, because, you know, you never know who's going to walk onto the garden, for starters. But they need to represent their garden. So it's you know, it's actually a month and a week, really, of work. And remember that, you know, some of those people haven't got studios full of employees carrying on with life.
Yes.
Everything, you
the
know,
day job.
Whole of their, that's right. The whole of their work, their life gets on hold, their families and everything. You know, it's a big interruption in one's life, really. Yeah. And a big build up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, so there's always, you know, speaking of people and the People's Choice Awards, there is always the celebrity factor.
Yes.
And probably the ultimate celebrity is always a member, not always, you know, the king and or queen in prior years. There's always a royal family appearance that is made. And
that's right.
I was just curious this year if A, King Charles attended, and B, if there was more of a buzz perhaps about this royal appearance, because King Charles is known to be such a very hands-on gardener himself.
Yeah. Well, press day is a funny day. I and I'll come to the royal family in a minute. But press day for me, it's like landing on planet celebrity, right? Because everybody you pass is somebody famous. It's the weirdest. It's not like, oh, I saw a really well-known Hollywood actor in a cafe. No, they're all around you, and it gets to the point where it's, you know, it's so bizarre. And I know, you know, in years gone by, you know, I've been in the ladies' loos and, you know, different cubicles, and out of both cubicles beside me come two like A-list actresses, and I'm thinking, this is surreal, you know. So it is very weird. But I have to say, getting older, the celebrities getting younger, a lot of the time there'll be all of these photographers, you know, and who is that? Can someone tell me who that is? So a lot of the older celebrities, I mean, you know, there are people that go that are really serious about their gardens, but there's all of this young actors and actresses and anybody basically. You know, a lot of them I've no idea who they are. However, the very first celebrity through the gates every year at the crack of dawn, literally, is Paul Smith, the clothes designer.
Really?
Always. Oh, because he is truly passionate about gardens and plants.
Okay.
He's always the first man through the gate. He's on those gardens at like, well, if he can get in there at 6 o'clock. In fact, he probably does. He probably gets in before anybody else. But he's always there. And I've got a lovely photo of him and Tom Stuart Smith, but it's both of the back of their heads, so it's pointless pointing it out, because it's two guys in the back of their heads. But he's not just there to be seen, he's there to see the gardens, and he's there to get inspiration for his fashion. And it's lovely that he's so passionate about plants. And he, you know, he's got his notebook. Yeah, it's lovely. And then, you know, I passed Paloma Faith, look, and you just, you know, you get somebody like that who, when she's kind of all dressed down, you almost, was that Paloma Faith? Well, it must be, because it's Chelsea, you know. And there are certain people who, you know, are absolutely passionate about the gardens and being there. And then there are the ones that are there because they can be there.
Yes.
So that's fine. But then this is what happens. So on press day, the doors open very early. You know, the very keen ones are in through the door very early. And then at 3 o'clock, everyone has to leave for the royal family. So because of security.
Oh, okay. So they clear the entire show.
Absolutely. Every garden and every stand is allowed to have one person on it to represent the garden.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, which is hard if, like, you're a double. Well, I don't know whether they make a concession if, like, the guys who did that beautiful garden in the marquee, whether they can both be there. Okay. But certainly one or two people per stand, per trade stand or garden or nursery. Everyone else has to clear out. And you'll see, like, 2 or 3 hours before the royal family arrive, you've got police going around with sniffer dogs. and so everybody's out by at 3, and I think probably that gives them time. By about 4 o'clock the royal family come. And yes, this year King Charles and Queen Camilla did come to the show.
Nice.
And so and he is very interested. I mean, he is very interested. But then there are lots of the other lower members of the royal family there as well.
Wow.
But it's definitely in their calendar. I think the Queen. I don't think the Queen missed. Or maybe she missed one. And I think even in her last year, I think she went round in a buggy, actually.
Wow.
So no, it's a very important thing on their calendar. Yeah.
That's so great. That's so.
And of course, it's thrilling. It's so thrilling for designers to have the royal visit come and ask them questions and, talk to them, or that it's such a thrill, really.
I am sure. I am absolutely. I mean, that is the ultimate celebrity. It really is.
Yeah,
however,
it is really.
we do have some younger listeners, which we hear from on occasion on social media, and so I am not going to be able to get out of this interview with you without pointing out. Word on the street is there was a Bridgerton garden this year.
Oh, there was a Bridgerton garden. Yes, there was.
And that it was the Bridgerton themed garden for those of the on social media who reached out to me. Thank you for pointing that out. Did you have any Lady Whistledown spottings?
Well, here it is. I never watched Bridgerton, so but I do recognise the actors and actresses from Bridgerton, and yes, there were a lot of them on the garden. On press day, looking beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Oh, I love it.
But I've never seen Bridgerton, so I just knew from kind of chat shows and things. Oh yeah, that must be
There it is.
I'm more interested in people like Nigel Slater, the chef, the cookie writer. He's always there, so for me that's a little thrill. Oh yeah, Nigel, he loves the show. Or Paul Smith,
I love it.
I'm just showing my age.
No. I would be very excited about Nigel too. I would also try to become his best friend and get invited over for dinner. That would be my thrill.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So for those who haven't attended, and I mean we're talking about lay people because it's not I will say it is not easy to get a press pass even for those in the press.
I know.
It is even harder to be a judge. So I'm so thrilled to have your insight on this. What are some insider's tips for a lay person attending the show? I mean, what can you say? You've already kind of given us an idea of go for those evening hours, if at all possible.
Yeah, well, the gardens get announced in usually around November time, the year before. And the tickets, I think, go on sale about the same time. So the first thing is to try and get a ticket.
Yeah.
And the first thing is to try and get a ticket for earlier in the week, because remember, if it's a really hot week all week, by the Friday or Saturday, the gardens are looking pretty tired, and if it's been really hot. So if you're really keen to come, go onto the RHS website and actually make sure you've put a date in your diary of when the tickets get on sale, and get yourself a ticket. Yeah. I think there's a restriction of how many tickets you can buy. So for example, you can't just block book 10 tickets.
Yeah.
I think you might be able to buy 1 or 2. So that's the first thing. Try and get there for the Tuesday or the Wednesday. Tuesday's fun because it's Medals Day. So there's a real buzz, And as I said, if you can get an all-day ticket, or you can get an afternoon and evening ticket. If you get an all-day ticket, of course you can stay until 8 o'clock in the evening, but you'll be exhausted. But if you think, well, I don't really want that mad rush and crowd, and I don't want to be walking around like this, then maybe the afternoon and evening ticket, so that if it's a gorgeous summer's evening, you can see that the crowds have started to dwindle a little bit, and it's a little bit calmer. So probably my suggestions would be, or advice would be, try and get early in the week, and just, if you are going to do all day, take some comfortable shoes.
Or steal some from the gardens.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Have a look, and make sure that it could be rain and or shine. It's England, remember, it's May, so it could be. I mean, today I'm wearing a cardigan. It's freezing outside today, or it could be wet. So come prepared, but comfortable shoes is definitely the thing. And there's a lot to see. I spent 2 days there and I didn't see everything, and I look at the TV coverage and I'll say, where on earth was that? Because it's impossible to see everything. It's just impossible, even in 2 days. So even in 1 day, oh my goodness me, you've got your work cut out for you to see everything.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, on press day, you're meeting people all the time on every corner that you haven't seen for a year. So you then spend 15 minutes chatting to somebody, and then you've forgotten where you were going. And, that it's good. It is good fun. It's good fun. Yeah.
And the Chelsea effect spills out beyond the Chelsea grounds, because I feel, when you go down the social media or the TV footage rabbit hole, you see, hotels and businesses and such around. Yeah. It really becomes this, they put up these gorgeous floral displays.
Oh, they do. And they get judged as well.
But now, what's happening? Really?
They do. So the King's Road, which runs along the top, so like about, let's say, 2 blocks above Chelsea, the King's Road, and then up Sloane Street and Sloane Square, which is all within a 5-minute walk of the show. Any shop, hotel, restaurant can decorate their frontage of their shop or of the steps, and then there's a little committee that go and judges them, and they have a best in show or a best, I think they call it best floral display. Yeah. So it does spill out. I walked along the King's Road. Actually, it was lovely because the first day I got there, one of our garden masterclass followers who lives in South Carolina, Wendy Wilty, was there, and I met her for supper on the King's Road. So I walked the length of the King's Road, cool. And got to have a look at all the shops, and they leave everything outside, like trays of vegetables and all sorts. I'm thinking, my goodness me, this is going to get pillaged, but it doesn't. I think everybody just goes and enjoys it. It's really lovely.
That is so unbelievable. Oh my goodness. So I know we have to wrap things up. I'm keeping you so long here, but
that's okay. I'm enjoying it. Don't worry.
Speaking of vegetables, you had an incredible photo that I don't know what to ask about it, but it was these gorgeous antique frames and vegetables that were wrapped around it. And I thought, oh my goodness, I have to ask, what is this? What's going on?
Well, this is a couple of women called She Grows It. That's the name of their company, She Grows It. And they specialize in heritage vegetables. And so what they did for their stand was to have these sort of what looked like Renaissance paintings with a black drop behind it, and these beautiful arrangements like a sort of Renaissance painting, and they were just exquisite. And I know that if people have watched the TV coverage, there are moments when Mary Berry is talking to them about that their vegetables, and so not only were they really beautiful arrangements, but they were very unusual and old heritage vegetables, which was fantastic.
And that was in the Marquee area as well.
That was in the Marquee, yes, definitely. Yeah.
All right. I thought, wow, was that on the King's Road? Where was she? This is beautiful.
No, that's in the Marquee, because there are vegetable growers and vegetable nurseries that do exhibit as well. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right. I swear this will be the final question, because you talked about you talked about the weather. You talked about, making sure it could be rainy, it could not be. I feel like the rainbow at the end of this conversation was a photo of a woman with a rainbow umbrella in her wellies standing in the middle of, there was tons and tons of water garden features that we didn't even talk about throughout most of the gardens that were absolutely stunning. But there was the one photo that you sent, and I thought, what is going on there? Did someone's irrigation pipe break? And that was the cleanup crew arriving.
No, that particular garden, the theme was what was it, sort of a flood management garden. So for gardens that flood, how to deal with excess water and flooding. And my goodness me, we're all having to deal with, greater wind and rain and so on and so forth. So that garden was all about managing excess water. And what they'd done is, behind their garden, they had rigged up, obviously, rain to happen. I mean, there were a couple of days that show was absolutely torrential rain, so they didn't have to do it. But for the days that were sunny, so they had these obviously hose pipes raining into the garden. So that was on press day, and she was standing with her umbrella. Talking about that. But the garden kind of fills up with flood water, and then sort of drains away, and all the planting is I was going to say drought tolerant. The opposite. It's flood tolerant planting, because a lot of people, if they live in an area that's susceptible to flooding, they need to know what to plant.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and right now, I was watching the Weather Channel this morning here in the States, and the southern portions of in Texas and such are experiencing insane floods right now. So
yes, I know. That's crazy.
Very appropriate. Crazy. Well, Annie, I can't wait to attend Chelsea, and
you've got to come.
Now I have an insider's track. I'd be remiss without saying, if you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Annie, she's absolutely delightful. Everything that she does is amazing. She, along with her co-business partner and also incredible garden designer Noel Kingsbury, they own and operate Garden Masterclass, which is based out of the UK. Go to gardenmasterclass.org, correct? And
that's correct.
Go and see what they have. They give brilliant tours, brilliant educational segments that are all around the entire world. She's just back from Sardinia, too. So the fact that she stayed awake for this conversation, I'm so impressed. But definitely, if you enjoyed this, please go to their website. Please check out. You can even do online courses there, which are absolutely amazing. And Annie, thank you so much. Next year, let's do this in person at Chelsea. How about that?
Oh, wouldn't that be so nice? Well, don't say that and not do it,
all
Danielle.
Right,
You've
okay.
got to come over.
All right.
And thank you so much for giving Garden Masterclass a plug. But also, we have a large North American following, and we do a free talk every Thursday night at 6:00 UK time, which of course East Coast time is lunchtime, and then West Coast is kind of breakfast time. But we do have a lot of people from the States joining in, so
absolutely.
And we have a lot of North American content as well. So
Yes,
it's very kind of you to mention it.
Yes, and so many of the garden designers that you've seen in Fine Gardening's pages have actually been featured on your Thursday night talks.
Absolutely.
I won't name drop right now because I don't want to play favorites, but all right.
You're getting nicely in tune with the judging vibe for Chelsea.
Good. That's right. Don't give it away. Give it away.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Annie, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you, Danielle. It's lovely to be asked to do it, and it's really nice to sort of to have time to sort of let things settle, and ideas and thoughts and what really resonated with me, and just to share it with people. But I would say the coverage obviously in TV is probably as good as being at the show, because it's so in depth. So it's great, it really is. So don't feel too hard done by if you can get it on Netflix. But if you can get over to the show, it is very special, and it'd be lovely to see you there.
Thank you.